Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and I was a little bit surprised this afternoon or I guess it was this morning, when we received an email from the Vikings saying Kevin O'Connell was going to talk. I thought that they might give the man a chance to catch a nap after coming back from London, but we've got a lot to talk about here on Purple Insider, presented by FanDuel. As always, we've got Kevin O'Connell's answer to my question about what he wants to see from JJ McCarthy as he returns from practice, to practice, and also Blake Cashman and Donovan Jackson as well are expected to practice this week, and Michael Juergens will be back, although it seemed like the door was left open potentially for Blake Brandel to continue at center, which is something that I want to discuss. So for the first hour, we're going to talk about the comments from Kevin O'Connell, what it means to have beaten the Cleveland Browns, and the outlook as we go forward into the bye week here. And then at 7:30, I will be joined as always by Brian Murphy and Manny Hill. So let's have a good conversation. You could jump in, start with your questions and comments into the comment section, but I don't want to waste too much time here. I want to bring you O'Connell's most, I thought, insightful thoughts about what he needs to see from JJ McCarthy as he gets back into practice. And just to spoil today's press conference, he did not come out and say, guys, I'm starting McCarthy or Wentz against the Philadelphia Eagles, because you know what? He doesn't have to at this moment. He doesn't have to tell us what he's going to do. And I actually thought from listening to these comments that it's quite possible that he doesn't know yet what he wants to do. So tell me if you have the same interpretation. Here is O'Connell on JJ McCarthy returning to practice.
Just in terms of JJ getting back to practice, what are you looking for from him over these next week and a half, 2 weeks?
Yeah, I think it's a good opportunity to get back to, he's had some real moments of growth through this time. I think watching the way Carson's kind of gone through progressions quickly, just the value of putting the ball in play, even when it's not your first progression, even when it's not, the most exciting completion of all time, and you're getting to TJ off of a little nudge and a protection to help here or there, and TJ's kind of the check down element. TJ's catching some of those balls. He had one on that, the touchdown drive at the end where he caught just a simple ball over the middle and went for 14 with some really good run after catch. So I think he's kind of taken a lot of that, of just watching it closely and my dialogue with him. But I think it's going to be the most critical part is going to be technique and fundamentals of playing the position the way he worked so hard to build up throughout the spring and the summer, getting him back into kind of the mandatory nature of certain things from a fundamental standpoint that will only help him perform at a high level. So I think it's going to be more about the physical side of his lower body mechanics and then just trying to put together a game plan for him throughout the practices of like how much can he do, what's the soreness level coming out of practices to be able to try to have the most consistent level of a ramp up we can with him.
So there you go. Kevin O'Connell, I think, with a lot there to break down. I mean, he starts out by talking about how JJ McCarthy can look at what we've seen from Carson Wentz and learn quite a bit. And the biggest area that I think we all identified that he needed to learn from with Wentz is getting rid of the football. That once again, and this is in part because of the head coach's scheme that was, I think, much improved last week against the Cleveland Browns. But when we look at Wentz, 2 of his games, he's getting rid of the ball at around or below 2.5 seconds. And that is the standard in the NFL for if you can get rid of the ball in less than 2.5 seconds, you can beat the pass rush. Normally, when it comes to sacks, it takes at least 2.75, 3, a little over 3 to get sacks in the NFL. Just think about someone in the shotgun and how long it takes unless they immediately blast through. So if you could get rid of the ball quickly, and we saw this from Wentz and from KOC's play calling in this last game, Myles Garrett had 2 pressures in this game, 2 pressures. And was that because Myles Garrett could not beat Justin School? I don't think so. They lined him up over School on the right side, even sometimes to get him away from Christian Darrisaw or try to get him away from where the tight ends were aligning. And here he would go right around the corner, and the ball was out time and time again in that game. And some of it, of course, does go to O'Connell reading the room and realizing we're in a lot of trouble if my guy takes a 9-step drop back and looks for a comeback route 23 yards down the field. So we better get it out of his hands. But also, Carson Wentz, as we've seen from the last couple games, was pretty good at seeing things and getting rid of it, especially if he could identify the coverage pre-snap and have a good sense of where the ball was going. There were many times where he hit the back foot, released the football. I was just watching the tape earlier today, and Justin Jefferson's not even out of his break yet, and then he's turning and the ball's hitting him. That is all rhythm and timing, which Kevin O'Connell talks about all the time. But you have to be able to execute it, right? You have to be able to see where you're supposed to go, and you have to be able to get the footwork. And as you heard O'Connell say, and I'm going to play it again so you can listen closely, because sometimes there's a lot of words in O'Connell's comments. So I want to play it again just for everybody to hear it, because he really went into great detail there. Like sometimes, and I remember saying that when an offense is functioning well for Kevin O'Connell, that means TJ Hockenson is getting the football. And even though he was chipping all day long yesterday, Hockenson still contributed on a couple of big plays. And the one he's talking about, he gives a nudge to, I think, Myles Garrett, and then he leaks over the middle, and there's a quick little check down that ends up going for 14 yards. This is just good decision-making, getting through reads fast, identifying where your open places in the defense are going to be, which is what JJ McCarthy has to do if and when he comes back. And I got the sense from those comments, at least the feeling, and this is only from O'Connell's way of speaking about this, that he wants to watch first what JJ McCarthy has taken away from the last few weeks and where he's at with the footwork and the fundamentals. When he called it critical about the fundamentals, that means as they get him back into practice, hyper-focusing on those things for McCarthy before making this decision. Now, I don't know that if it's already made or not of what he's going to do, whether he's going to put him back in or whether he's going to stay with Carson Wentz, but at least from the way that he stated all of those things that he wants to see from McCarthy, it sounded to me like, let me see where he's at. That's what I was hearing from that. Let me see where JJ McCarthy is at with learning from Carson Wentz, watching how he operated the offense, which at a lot of times over these last 3 games has been really excellent. And there's been some other times where he tries to go 1-on-2 against 2 linebackers and he gets slammed in the shoulder and has to leave the game, or he holds onto the ball too long, or whatever it might be. There's been some ugly moments, some throws behind receivers and all that. They didn't go 3-0, but there's also been a lot of really good stuff that's just veteran quarterback play. And when you look at the breakdown of just for example, the PFF grades versus how many yards they were able to pick up in these last couple weeks, Wentz isn't blown anybody out of the water with his grade, yet his expected points added is above average in the NFL for starting quarterbacks. What does that say to us when the production is higher than the grade? It probably means that the receivers are open and the scheme is working and the throws are there, but you have to see them and you have to get rid of it. And I think all those comments right there are why, coming out of the Atlanta game, that we talked about this of it wasn't just, oh, well, they were missing a player on the offensive line, so whatever, sorry, he gets a big pass. I mean, I was never going to be that way regardless, but I think what you heard from O'Connell is all the things that he wanted to see from him coming out of a game against Atlanta the last time he started, where he didn't show a lot of those things, where the pressure got to him because he did hang on to the ball too much. I looked this up today. Of quarterbacks with 50 dropbacks or more, McCarthy is 5th in terms of time to throw. And the other 4 ahead of him are all running quarterbacks. It's Justin Fields, it's Caleb Williams, it's Lamar Jackson, all guys who are going to scramble all over the place. And that's not how he's going to play his game. So the ball has to come out earlier. It has to work with the rhythm and timing. The footwork has to be there. The reads have to be there. And the decision making has to be there too. And Wentz making some really great decisions against the Browns. Some of those turned into nothing. Some of those turned into 3 yards. Some of those turned into 5 yards or an incompletion, but he had 0 interceptions, only a couple sacks on the day, and did not throw that game away. Gave them a chance to grind it out and then eventually win on a really excellent final drive that was called so well by Kevin O'Connell to understand the amount of time that he had to work with, the situation, how they could dink and dunk down the field a little bit and then give them a chance to go after Justin Jefferson. And really, as we saw yesterday, the thing about Wentz that I would be most complimentary of his last 3 games that JJ McCarthy has to learn from is throwing to Justin Jefferson. How you do that, how you utilize a true number 1 wide receiver. He's got one-on-one coverage with Denzel Ward. They've been waiting for it all day. Here it comes, one-on-one down the sideline. He makes a play. Or there were times where he just had to execute something simple. There was a play where it was 2 guys on the left side. It was him, Jefferson, and maybe Jalen Naylor. And they ran a little kind of 2-man thing where it's a little bit of deception, and then he snaps out of a route and he's open, but the ball is already in the air. So Wentz already knew what he was looking at from a coverage. They were playing off coverage. So he was going to be able to push vertical, force the defensive back to respect the possibility that he might go deep and then break off an out route. But if you break off that out route and the throw comes slow and the timing and the footwork isn't right, that ball is getting knocked down or it's getting picked off. And that's where all of this with O'Connell works together with his system, and why when it's executed properly, you could get 2 wins in 3 games and pretty darn good statistics out of a quarterback who's been a backup for the last 3 years and has played for 6 teams in 6 years. And yet Wentz played well enough to win 2 out of 3. That's why they talk about it as the quarterback friendly system, but you have to make it that way by executing it with the footwork and with the timing. And this is my sense, is that what Kevin O'Connell is going to do here is they're going to go into practice this week, and they are going to, this week, McCarthy's going to work this week. Not everybody's going to work this week out at TCO Performance Center, but they're going to go into these practices. And he even mentioned, at another question, he mentioned the fact that they're going to have that extra Monday, because everyone's going to come back and they're actually going to practice Monday. And normally, if you play on a Sunday, if you are in Cleveland or in Pittsburgh or something and you play on a Sunday, then you're not going to practice on Monday or have any sort of significant practice because everybody's so banged up. But in this case, they can have a real practice on Monday and he can start to get an extra look at it. So that was my feeling, is that O'Connell at this moment may not know yet how he's going to handle this situation. It also might play into the left shoulder of Carson Wentz, because he described him as pretty sore and said that they were still evaluating Carson Wentz, and that may be an issue as well with his left shoulder. My injury expert, Jeremiah Searles, who's probably had all the injuries out there, said he thought, maybe an AC joint or something. Always want to stay away from being a doctor, but that looked like it hurt a lot. And that might linger for Carson Wentz, which could play into the decision if it's really problematic for him as well. But I suspect if it's not, then it will come down to JJ McCarthy is supposed to be your QB1. He's supposed to be your long-term quarterback. You're not bailing on him after 2 games. We all know that Kevin O'Connell did not throw up his hands after the game against Atlanta and say, I'm done with this kid. It's over, folks. Don't ever talk to me about JJ McCarthy ever again. That was not what happened. But if you're going to believe that someone is ready to start for you and ready to win games against the Philadelphia Eagles and the Los Angeles Chargers, who both now look a lot more beatable than they did 2 weeks ago. There's a lot of guys on that D-line for Philly who have exited or there's some injuries, and Bo Nix was able to come back against them. and the Chargers just put Omeri and Hampton on IR. Like, there's their running game. And that would have been my biggest concern for the Vikings. Saquon Barkley now has a knee injury. He has not played well at all. These are winnable games. So if you are going to start McCarthy, O'Connell has to be convinced that you can win these games. Because otherwise, if he doesn't love what he sees in practice, then it would be wise to shelf that decision and go with the quarterback that's going to give you a better chance to win. So let me play you the comment again by Kevin O'Connell, because I just thought it was very insightful of all the things that he has seen from Wentz in running this offense that he needs to see from JJ McCarthy. And he also included the health as well. And that's going to matter, because as much as we're going to make this into QB controversy, McCarthy versus Wentz, if he goes into practice this week and the ankle is not ready to go, well, then it's not, I keep saying this week, but next week he's going to work out this week. If it doesn't respond the way they want it to respond, then of course that's going to set this entire thing back anyway. So there is a lot to look at here, but I just thought this was such a great answer of here's what he has to understand. And also recognizing that McCarthy is in the very infancy here of his career and learning how to play in the NFL. And it may have ended up benefiting him to step back, having now gone out there and tried to run the offense. It's not the same as sitting there and watching Sam Darnold run it and seeing someone run it more the way that he has to. And it may have actually been not the best to watch Sam Darnold do it, because Darnold hung in the pocket forever. Darnold had the farthest average depth of target in the league, or the most explosives, most downfield passing yards in the NFL. Well, that's not really the situation now. And it's also not really the way McCarthy has to play. McCarthy has to play that if he's a little bit of a check down merchant, that's okay. And if you look at games around the league, that's actually succeeding. And I've talked about this a few times where I feel like the league has gone back to 2005. And I'm like, am I crazy? Am I just getting old? And I'm like hoping it goes back to 2005 because I have Madden 05 sitting over here. And I'm not. I am not crazy, because I looked up the numbers on pass yards per attempt, net yards per attempt, sack percentage, all these things. The throws are getting shorter. The sacks are getting higher. And the last time it looked like this in the NFL was literally 2005, 2006. So it has gotten harder to play quarterback as a downfield passer. That's the type of era when somebody like Rich Gannon had a lot of check down passes and went to the Pro Bowl and won MVP, throwing a lot underneath and quick, and then every so often hitting something downfield the way that Carson Wentz did yesterday against Cleveland. And I don't mean to make it sound like it was Joe Montana or Steve Young, but he just did a lot of things that were right for Kevin O'Connell's game plan, and he's going to need to see those from JJ McCarthy. So I'm going to bring it to you again, Kevin O'Connell, on what he wants to see from McCarthy when he comes back to practice.
Just in terms of JJ getting back to practice, what are you looking for from him over these next week and a half, 2 weeks?
Yeah, I think it's a good opportunity to get back to, he's had some real moments of growth through this time. I think watching the way Carson's kind of gone through progressions quickly, just the value of putting the ball in play, even when it's not your first progression, even when it's not, the most exciting completion of all time, and you're getting to TJ off of a little nudge and a protection to help here or there, and TJ's kind of the check down element. TJ's catching some of those balls. He had one on that, the touchdown drive at the end where he caught just a simple ball over the middle and went for 14 with some really good run after catch. So I think he's kind of taken a lot of that, of just watching it closely in my dialogue with him. But I think it's going to be the most critical part is going to be technique and fundamentals of playing the position the way he worked so hard to build up throughout the spring and the summer, getting him back into kind of the mandatory nature of certain things from a fundamental standpoint that will only help him perform at a high level. So I think it's going to be more about the physical side of his lower body mechanics and then just trying to put together a game plan for him throughout the practices of like how much can he do what's the soreness level coming out of practices, to be able to try to have the most consistent level of a ramp up we can with him.
So I think there's something else to observe there as well, which is one of the most commented things that I've gotten over the last couple of weeks is, well, you guys in the media, you told us that McCarthy was going to be so great and you lied to us, which is sort of funny because you can only go to the practice and see. I am not a fortune teller. Surprisingly enough, I bet there's YouTube channels out there that you could look for and maybe that will help you, but that is not me. However, I think you heard it there where he was talking about how McCarthy was able to execute with those fundamentals that he's talking about and the footwork and the reads and all those things that we did see throughout training camp, that we did see throughout minicamp from McCarthy. But I think we can all put our heads together and figure out what happened in the first 2 weeks, which is the game is not the same on the practice field as it is in the real world. When the other team has game plans that you've never seen before, they have great players that you've never gone up against before. And I think what happened against Atlanta was he got pressure quickly, and you don't need to remind me that Darrisaw wasn't playing. He got pressure quickly. He took hits early in the game, and that sped up things. And then all of a sudden, all that technique and fundamentals, it kind of went away. And I think you could see some of that on tape, and I think that he's alluding to it there. And that's what happens. That's why, as you're a defense, you want to hit the opposing quarterback early, right? That's a game plan thing for every team. Hit that opposing quarterback early and get him off his game, get him sped up, get him feeling the rush, all those things. That's why a lot of times you see quick passes early in the game so quarterbacks can get in a rhythm. And I also think that O'Connell, when he's talking about the TJ Hawkinson play, he should also be happy with himself over that because there were so many successful passes that went between 0 and 9 yards. I was looking at the stats today. I think that Wentz averaged something like 7 yards per attempt on throws that didn't travel any farther than 9 yards down the field in the air. And that's scheme, and that's the ball coming out in quick passing offense that we were talking about looking for from O'Connell. And it took him playing against the nasty Cleveland Browns, but also probably an adjustment to the O-line, an adjustment to what had happened against the Pittsburgh Steelers to stick with that and have options for Carson Wentz to give him an option right in front of his face, TJ Hawkinson, while the pressure is coming. Well, that's what will need to happen for JJ McCarthy as well, is I think that O'Connell has to shift with the league, where the league is now getting into a lot more short passes, getting into a lot more yards after catch to try to negate some of these complicated defenses, some of these great pass rushes. And what is it that always beats Brian Flores? What is it? I'll say it together. It's the quick passing game in the middle of the field. We saw it against the Steelers. We saw it against the Rams. We saw it against the Lions about 5 different times with Jared Goff and his ability to pick those things apart. Even there were plays that should have been there that Ben Johnson drew up in week 1 that Caleb Williams didn't make, but that's the way. And so when McCarthy comes back, when he comes back, KOC also has to have it in his own head of that's the type of offense that you should be running with JJ McCarthy. But there was a lot of interesting comments there about sometimes just taking what's there easily for you, getting through the progression quickly, getting the footwork and fundamentals back to where he had it during practice. This team didn't put JJ McCarthy in at QB1 and have him mostly uncontested through the whole summer and pick up Wentz at the very end if they were watching practices and thought, oh my gosh, this guy can't play. That's not what was happening. What was happening is he was getting it. But when you get into the real games, sometimes it doesn't always stick the way that you want it to, and circumstances play into it, and other mistakes play into it, and backups play into it, and all those things. So as they go into these 2 weeks, it seems like it's going to be a pretty hard evaluation for Kevin O'Connell. I mean, a very serious evaluation of what he is seeing from JJ McCarthy before he makes this call. For me, I would not factor in who you're playing, when you're playing them, any of those things. Yeah, I know the Chargers are coming up in 4 days. I get it. But then the Lions are after that. And the Lions are a really hard team. And Ford Field is a really hard place. When are you going to do it if you're not going to do it now? Right? I would only factor in, does he look like he's ready to go back and play? And does he physically meet the check marks to go back and play to where he can use his legs and be more of a playmaker as well? But does it look like he is getting the understanding a little bit better of how to deal with the lower body stuff that O'Connell's talking about, the footwork and the technique of this offense? And does it look like he took away some things from the way Carson Wentz handled it? Because if he played like Carson Wentz and added his playmaking, I mean, you've probably got really good quarterback play at that point. I mean, we know that McCarthy's not going to be flawlessly accurate. We know it's not that he's never going to make a mistake or anything else like that. But we've seen from these last couple games, you can have imperfect quarterback play with this team around you, which is now getting healthier, by the way. As O'Connell mentioned today, Donovan Jackson and Blake Cashman are going to practice along with Michael Juergens. And you're going to get the full group with Darisaw, with Addison, with Jackson coming back, and every opportunity still there. He did not mention Aaron Jones, which is kind of concerning, but every opportunity still there to put together the season that you thought you would, especially with the flawed nature of the NFC. So this decision sounds to me, at least as of right now, until I get further information, sounds to me like it's kind of up to JJ McCarthy. If he can prove to the coaching staff that he's good to go and that he can lock in on some of these things that they're looking for, then he should be back starting a quarterback. Now, there's other politics at play. What does Jefferson think? What does the leadership group of the team think? They're playing Carson Wentz's former team. I don't know if that factors in at all. Their evaluation of Carson Wentz. I mean, they may look at the tape and say, boy, this is a hard guy to bench because he's been this good according to the play calls we had, and we think we can win with him. But I don't think that he set the bar so high that you can't put JJ McCarthy in. And I think if McCarthy had played these 3 games, we probably would have seen a lot of the same. An easy win against the Bengals where you're playing from ahead all day and it feels great. Probably a very tough day against the Steelers where they mess with your mind the entire game and beat you up. And then a tight win against the Cleveland Browns. I would have expected that from JJ McCarthy. So we will see. But it sounds to me more from these comments like it's in his hands. And I think that's the right way to do it for McCarthy. Show Kevin O'Connell, show Josh McCown that you're ready to get back in there and play, because the last time it wasn't up to the standard that it needs to be to give your team a chance to win. So that's only game 2, though, of a career that we expect to be a lot longer than 2 games. I think that that's where we're at. So questions, thoughts. I do have a, let's see, I got a FanDuel question of the day for you guys as always. And the FanDuel question of the day here is the Vikings are now plus 265 to make the playoffs. I want to give you the NFC teams that are ahead of them in the odds as of right now. Dallas, Atlanta, Seattle, Washington, Green Bay, Detroit, Tampa Bay, and San Francisco. So the Vikings at plus 265 on FanDuel, the Cowboys, Falcons, Seahawks, Commanders, Packers, Lions, Bucks, and 49ers are ahead of them in the odds. Do you agree with that list of teams, or are there 1 or 2 teams that you think the Vikings still should be better than to make the playoffs? Because that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So they've got the Vikings as the 9th best team, and they need to at least be the 7th. So who on that list do you think the Vikings should be better than? All right, let's get to some of your comments here. I'm going to have to scroll back up in the comments, and we can have a conversation here for the next half hour. And then we'll get to Manny and Brian Murphy, and we're going to break all of it down. Let's see. Two Dog Dad says, it feels like the Carson Wentz offense is still building. Well, I do think that they had a better game plan with Carson Wentz than they did against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I also thought that Wentz seemed to understand it a little bit better and wasn't trying to do crazy stuff Like I thought there were a few times that he tried way too hard to be a playmaker against Pittsburgh and they made him pay, where Cleveland kind of didn't. There were a few times where he still tried to escape as opposed to throwing the ball away or maybe sliding as opposed to going straight in with your shoulder. But at the same time, he was very safe with the football. He threw it into spaces where there weren't going to be a lot of defenders around, a lot of traffic. And then when he needed to go downfield, he did. And you may be right that if you kept playing Carson Wentz and you kept building with this offense and his strengths, that you can win games. And I think we've seen enough of Wentz against the Bengals, at times against Pittsburgh, and then against Cleveland, that you could sell me on being able to win 9 or 10 games with Carson Wentz if he starts the rest of the way. But my concern there would be that JJ McCarthy at this point in his career is a top 10 draft pick quarterback who has mobility. And I think it's very hard to win in the league with no mobility. I would want that as a higher potential ceiling. And that's why I've kind of leaned that way toward get McCarthy back in there, because it has a higher potential outcome of things clicking for him. And then he can do all the same stuff that Wentz has done. Wentz has done a great job, a great job. But there's also nothing insane that he's done. It's not like, oh my gosh, it's Drew Brees Wentz back there just dropping dime after dime after dime. Like, that hasn't been how it's been. It's really been a game manager type offense with a couple of great throws, including the game winner. And he deserves all the credit for winning 2 out of 3 games. Wonderful job by a backup quarterback. But what you're looking for is to do all that and then add 25 to 50 yards per game on the ground with JJ McCarthy, add some special throws from JJ McCarthy, and you've got yourself a pretty darn good offense. I mean, if they can be 13th in expected points added as of right now with Carson Wentz in there, your expectation is if it clicks for McCarthy, it could be even better than that. It's not going to be easy, but it never is in the NFL. So I agree that if they kept going with Carson Wentz, they could be fairly successful, but can you really be dangerous? I'm not so sure that you can with Carson Wentz over an entire season. It feels to me more like it would be a year where you'd go into the final week of the season kind of hoping for a bunch of breaks and maybe you make the playoffs, and that's about as good as it could possibly get. But we'll see from O'Connell's comments there, because I thought they were really well laid out of his thought process and what he needs to see from McCarthy. But if he doesn't play against Philadelphia and he doesn't play against the Chargers, then I think we have the idea pretty clearly that he's going to want to see more development behind the scenes from McCarthy. And if that's what he ends up wanting to see, then I'm okay with that, because he should do what's best for JJ McCarthy and his overall development, and not just what we all want to see, which is McCarthy back under center. Everyone wants to see that because there was so much buildup. There was so much attention on this quarterback situation. The whole couple of years built up to this and him getting out there and being the quarterback. So when that happens, and when you spend so much time thinking about what this could be with the unknown, the great unknown prospect quarterback, and then you don't get to see him, and then you don't get to see him again after that really special night in Chicago, it's tough. Everybody wants him back out there. But if O'Connell thinks that's not the right thing to do based on what he sees in practice, it just sounds to me like the ball has been handed to McCarthy. It's in your court. Show me. That's what it sounded like there. That might not be what the message is in the building. I don't know, but that's what it sounded like there. It sounded like there. This is what I need from you. And if you do it, you're going to be back. That's what it sounded like. But the results are going to tell us this. Brett says, feel great about this win. The O-line will get healthy and the skill positions are awesome. KOC needs to play call like he did yesterday. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that, that the play calling was very, very good. And now we see with Donovan Jackson. Now, if Donovan Jackson gets back to 100% and he's playing, and this is what I want to talk about as well, because O'Connell left the door open for Blake Brandel continuing at center. Now, his PFF grade didn't blow my mind. It wasn't actually that good because he had the holding that negated a play. And, you know, that's always a tough thing to explain. that the PFF grades hammer these offensive linemen for penalties, and they should. It's a 10-yard negative play that should have been an explosive pass. And we never got another look at that play on the replay. I didn't go back and look on the tape. I should have, to see how bad that was, but it sounded from O'Connell's comments like he was extremely pleased with the way that Blake Brandel played in this game. And he said that Brandel had fun out there and really loved it. And he's a guy who's been in this league for much longer than Michael Juergens. I don't think that Juergens fell apart when he was asked to play center. But I think that Brandel's probably more experienced, more prepared for this, has seen a lot more things in his day. And the fact that he could snap the ball effectively, I don't think that this is where it might be a bit of a struggle. I don't think they can run outside zone stuff with Brandel as their center, and you didn't see a ton of it because that's just really hard to do. So they may want Juergens back. Juergens is an outside zone type of center. He's quick. He's a little undersized. He can get to, they did a lot against Cincinnati with Juergens in there. That might make a difference that he is been pegged as the backup for this entire time and he can run differently with him in there. But whether it's Juergens or Brandel, you're still going to deal with some weakness, but neither guy has been horrible. I think both of them have been reasonable over the times that they've been in for Ryan Kelly. So if your offensive line has one guy with question marks about it, and then Fry's played really well in pass protection, has not been the body mover in the run game that we expected, and maybe that'll click in. You know, he was coming off that horrible injury, so I've wondered a little bit about that, about the explosiveness and whether that's not quite back yet. But he had a good day in pass protection yesterday, and then Brian O'Neill didn't get an update on him today, which to me will be something we ask later on leading up to the next game. But as far as we knew, the MCL usually takes a little while. That's not an easy one. You don't just pop back up after an MCL. So even though it was reported as week to week, typically those are like 4 weeks, somewhere in that range. So I'd be kind of looking more at Detroit for him. But look, even Justin School, you got to give Justin School a ton of credit. There were some reps where he's one-on-one with Myles Garrett and Garrett doesn't get to the quarterback. So if your line for the next 2 games has 3 out of 5, and School isn't playing left tackle, but instead right tackle, which theoretically should be a little easier, then you can win that way with that offensive line. And I'll be interested, but I really like the way that Blake Brandel played at center in this game. So I think that there's a good chance that he does continue to be the center, but it might make a difference for how they can run. Let's see. Nasaj says, seems to me PFF grades should be taken with a grain of salt, not the gospel some people refer to. Well, I wrote an entire book about it, my friend, and it's right over here that anybody can read if they want to fully understand how the PFF grades work. But I think when it comes to offensive line grades, they're as good as you're ever going to get. And let me know if you have some better way of doing it. But I'll tell you what. The grades over the time that I've been covering this team have matched up really, really well with the team's decision-making. Who they play, how much they play them, how much they pay, and how much how long they pay guys for contracts often matches up really closely with the way that PFF is grading their players. So I do think that you can take it with actually a lot of value. And I would go as far as to say a ton of value, knowing how it's done. Is it perfect? No. But you know what's also not perfect is coaches grading their own players. A coach loves a player, loves him behind the scenes, great guy, their families have dinner together. Is he grading it the same way as someone objective? So also, I know from my book and from interviewing Kwesi Adafo-Mensah for my book that the Vikings use the PFF grades. They have certain ways of adjusting them to things that they know, and they also use them comparatively. So they are being used within the NFL, and we have 10 years of data and contracts to prove how much they match up together. So yeah, for a single game, what can happen though, here's the problem. It speaks to your point. For a single game, a penalty could knock somebody's grade down quite a bit. 2 penalties can crush somebody's grade, which is pretty tough. Or one play, it doesn't factor for matchups. So if you're playing Malik Collins, who is a fantastic defensive tackle, and he gets by you and creates a pressure on the quarterback, you're going to get a minus. If you were playing, I don't know, Shamar Stephen, who never got a pressure ever, like Shamar, but he didn't, maybe you're giving up no pressures and you're getting a great grade. I also think what we saw yesterday that's important to remember too is if you get the ball out faster, the guys get better grades because they're not giving up as many negative plays. So single game grades can be really swung on a handful of plays. If you give up one or two pressures, that might hurt your grades significantly, or have one or two negative runs. So that's why you need much bigger samples, and using single game grades to say this is the absolute truth about Blake Brandel would not be fair. So I agree with you there. So they carry a ton of value, but they also need us to use our noggins and our context and understand that Blake Brandel was going against one of the best D-lines in football. If he had not so good of a PFF grade against, I don't know, the Raiders or somebody who stinks, the Cowboys, they can't pressure anybody, well, then it would be a little bit different. So that is kind of your little tutorial about how to contextualize some of those grades. But you asked the wrong guy about this. A former offensive line coach, Paul Alexander, told me in the book, guys are going to the Hall of Fame these days because of their PFF grades. And he explained to me how he not only used them for his own teaching when he was an offensive line coach in the NFL, but also how he helped shape the grades to PFF and get their grading system as accurate as they could possibly get it from the outside. So there's your little breakdown, and you could buy the book if you want to know a little more than that. So, there's always they don't know the assignments. Number one, there's only so many different ways to block certain things, like outside zone runs and so forth. And the other thing is that teams, they evaluate free agents as well and players on the other teams, and they don't know their assignments. So they should just not try, or they should take every single thing, every single bit of information you get about the other team. You don't know the assignments. You should just not do it. So anyway, we don't have to go too much farther down that road, but the point is that the single game grade for Blake Brandel was impacted by that holding penalty, which I thought may have been a little suspect. And overall, I thought he did an excellent job of managing the competition that he was playing against. And he might be somebody that they decide to stick with at center because of that. He also snapped the ball well and seemed very confident. So those things matter as well. That's what I'm saying. We have to use our brains when it comes to that sort of thing. Let's see. I'm not sure how you guys got onto Randy Moss, but KFT asks, any news why Darisaw left the last game? Yes. They said that he was on a snap count because he had played 75 snaps the previous game, and they did not expect that to happen. Like nobody would have expected 75 snaps, and that they didn't want him to have 150 snaps overseas when he's still coming back. And Darisaw said that he wants to make sure he's communicating with them after the game. He told the reporters who were there that he's got to know his body, right? And I wonder if he communicated with them like, hey, this might be a lot to put on the new knee. And they decided overall that playing him for 4 quarters was going to be a little bit too much. It also may have been a thing that they say, like, yeah, we always wanted to do that and play it safe with him, but they may have been in a wait and see, like, let's see how he feels through a couple of quarters and then go from there. But that was the official explanation, was that it's not an injury or a new injury. It's just that he was on a snap count for overseas for those 2 games. And remember, he didn't play the full game against Cincinnati. We didn't see a full bevy of work from Harrison Smith. In fact, I didn't check how many plays did Harrison Smith play in this game. So they're clearly taking it a little bit slower. 29. So that's kind of the ramp up. We saw that last week. I think it was only 17. That's just how this group does it. They play it a lot more patiently than maybe a previous regime. AZ Vikes says school definitely stepped up. I was impressed. Me too. And, that's why we shouldn't write someone off after one bad game. Maybe it was a bad matchup or new offense or whatever, but Justin School was huge in this game. Another situation where was his pass blocking grade great? No, it wasn't. But we also have to consider who he was going up against and that he's a backup tackle and you just need to do enough. He allowed 3 pressures on 41 dropbacks. I mean, just do enough. Just do enough. And that's what he was able to do in that game. And that's why you have to contextualize those things. Kevin's Outdoor Buzz says, O'Connell said the same thing about JJ watching Darnold. I don't think watching another quarterback play helps any quarterback. Reps help a quarterback play at a high level, not sitting on the bench. Well, if that were true, if that were totally true, then I don't think that it would work so well to develop quarterbacks not playing, which historically it really has. Whether it's Jordan Love or Aaron Rodgers or Patrick Mahomes, or there's a bunch of other examples of quarterbacks who have needed a little more time before they were ready to play that have worked with the scout team and have gotten reps against the first team defense during the season and watched and studied and seen how the starter does it. The problem with what you're saying is that when he was watching Darnold do these things, he had never done them before himself, and he couldn't even practice them. He was watching them, yes, take him in. Also, Darnold had some pretty bad habits of sticking in the pocket too long, trying to scramble out the back, staying with the first read for too long. Like, it wasn't exactly the perfect technical way of playing the position. It was kind of the, yo, I'm a baller way of playing the position. I'm going to stand in here and get drilled and make a 30-yard throw down the field. And it was awesome to watch, but it was not the way Wentz has done it, which is Wentz has been very smart with the football on a lot of plays. He's gotten it out quickly. He's thrown to the underneath options. He hasn't just stayed on his number one option and tried to let that come all the way open down the field. He's also played with really good anticipation at times. Now McCarthy can see these things and then apply them in practice. But I don't disagree with you that playing is going to be the best thing for someone. At the same time, is it always? Because if JJ McCarthy comes back and has 2 more games like Atlanta and the first 3 quarters of Chicago because he doesn't have the fundamentals down, is that helping him? Does that make it better for him? If he can't do at this moment in his career, doesn't mean he's a bust. Look at Mayfield, look at Daniel Jones, look at Sam Darnold, look at Mac Jones. Just because somebody can't do it effectively right now when they are 22 years old doesn't mean that it's over. And that's kind of how we're treating it. Like, if he doesn't play against Philly, it's over. Goodbye, McCarthy. Like, that's not how it needs to be treated. But if O'Connell feels like he can't do those things, he's going to get hurt. He's going to hang on to the ball too long, as he did against Atlanta. He's going to get hit. He's going to get hurt. And then he's going to end up like Anthony Richardson or Trey Lance, where those guys needed to develop behind the scenes. And I think that's the biggest fear, is if he can't get the fundamentals down, then there's a possibility of another injury and taking a lot of hits and putting a lot of mileage on that body in his first couple years. And it's not always the easiest to recover because you can't develop while you're hurt. You can develop behind the scenes while you're practicing and while you're studying how Carson Wentz, a starting quarterback in the league, is playing. You can get better doing that. You can't get better if you're having another surgery or if you're rehabbing or, things like that. So I think that would be their fear. So I don't totally disagree with you. And yet I think we've seen enough examples where behind the scenes work is actually really good for these quarterbacks. Sean says, would love to hear a breakdown on Tuesday morning left guard of the chances of 64 sticking at center long term, or is it just a nice one-off performance? So I was talking with Jeremiah last night, and to give you a preview of tomorrow's show, because we'll absolutely talk about it, he was impressed as well. He was impressed with Blake Brandel, and I think believes that he should go forward for sure. Let's see. Nasaj, hopefully, if I'm not saying it right, please correct me. Says, wonder if Hargrave's low snaps happening in a game he played well means that's the goal going forward. So very noticeable. And let me bring that up. Very noticeable. And I appreciate what you said about PFF. I know you're not hating. I just thought, let me explain the whole thing because that comes up a lot. So Jonathan Hargrave or Javon Hargrave played only 33 snaps, but only 12 in run defense and 21 in the pass rush, and got 4 pressures and the highest PFF grade because he crushed it in pass rush. He also made a couple of tackles against the run. I think this is the way going forward. I think to use him as a more situational pass rushing defensive tackle and have Levi Drake Rodriguez and Jalen Redmond in there, that is the way. And, those guys have gotten blamed a lot for the run defense. The gap, and look, I respect the hell out of Eric Wilson, but the gap between Eric Wilson and Blake Cashman, who's one of the best in the NFL, it's pretty big when it comes to run defense. When you look at their run defense grades, it's just a big difference. Cashman is so fast and so violent and so instinctual and so good at beating blocks. It plays into it that other teams have been able to run with Blake Cashman out. And we saw last year that other teams were able to run against the Vikings when Cashman was out as well. Jahmyr Gibbs, I know, is always good against them, but he crushed them in that game where they didn't have Cashman. So I think that's a big deal for him to come back. Let's see. Skywalking McCarthy. He had a whole season on the bench to watch Darnold. He needs 2 seasons watching LOL. I mean, look, do we need to do this? Do we need to use Google? Don't you folks use ChatGPT all the time these days or whatever the hell that is? Look up how many quarterbacks weren't ready to play in their first year, or how many quarterbacks played right away and then struggled and then got benched and never got another chance. If Kevin O'Connell thinks it's the right thing to do to wait on McCarthy because he doesn't have the fundamentals right to run this offense, then it's the right thing to do, period. And if you want to call him a bust because he's not ready to play at age 22 when he started 2 games, well, I guess that you can if you want to, if you just want to be that person. It doesn't make any sense, but you can if you want to be that person. And there seems like there's a lot of people who do, but it doesn't click at all with any history whatsoever or even logic in my eyes when you have someone who already was coming out of college as a raw quarterback and he spent a year where he couldn't practice those things that he was seeing. So he's taken in a lot mentally, but it's way different to actually go out there and get it in your body, right? Like this would be, if you're a musician, you can know the song, but that doesn't mean you can play it unless you have enough practice doing it, right? And just playing on a stage in front of 60,000 people might not be the best. You might need to practice in your bedroom a little bit more before you're ready to do that. And there's so many freaking quarterbacks over the years. So many. There's a bunch of them in the NFL right now whose teams gave up too early, who pushed them too fast. Sam Darnold was 20, and the Jets just threw him out there and said, just go get it, Tiger. Well, now he's a great quarterback. And he's been a really good quarterback since he was like 26, but it took a while. And I mean, I don't know what happened in New England, but even Mac Jones, like getting, kind of thrown to the wolves there, made the playoffs in his first year, kind of had a disastrous situation. But Baker Mayfield, bad situation, thrown in too soon. A lot of these guys have had this happen over the years. And I could tell you historically, I mean, I don't know how many historically. Alex Smith is one that comes to mind that was thrown in too early, struggled, took a long time. But you all know with Rodgers, go back and look at college tape of Rodgers and how he throws the football. Tell me that he didn't benefit from watching Brett Favre. Tell me that Jordan Love didn't benefit from watching Aaron Rodgers. If this is what they think the right thing to do is long-term with JJ McCarthy, then they should do it. But I think what O'Connell said there was that the door is open. Show me that you've learned some things over the last couple of weeks from watching Carson Wentz, and now you get to go out and do it in practice, as opposed to just watching it from the rehab room last year. So I think it is a pretty big difference. But I know, because it's football, because it's quarterbacks, a lot of people like to try to get in early, and they like to put a stake down, and they like to say, he's a bust, Or even after one game with like Jackson Dart, he's great. Look what they did with Jackson Dart. He's great. And then the next week he stinks. We a lot of times don't know with quarterbacks. And I'll give you a great example of that is Baker Mayfield. If Tampa Bay knew with Baker Mayfield he was going to be this good, they would not have given him kind of a half-hearted contract extension. Remember that Baker Mayfield played for the Panthers along with Sam Darnold, and they had two of the best quarterbacks in the NFL on their roster and got rid of both of them. Does anybody, and I know you could say it's the Panthers, but I mean, the 49ers, they extend Brock Purdy and then Mac Jones plays just as well. They draft Trey Lance and then Brock Purdy plays much better. Who knows? It's hard to figure these things out, even when you have sample sizes, much, much less of 2 games. So I think that the concept that O'Connell, watch McCarthy practice and say, I just don't feel like it's ready to play against the Philadelphia Eagles, who have, I don't know, how many games have they won? There was a stat yesterday, maybe Jason Garrett threw out there. They won like 21 of their last 24 games or something. Maybe he's not ready to play against them. Maybe he's not ready to play against a complicated defense like the Chargers. If O'Connell decides that, then that's the right decision. But it sounds like it's on the table that he could earn his stripes here in practice. JP says, can Kevin keep this offense for JJ and do more different stuff, such as running back screens, slants, etc.? If yes, our offense will show it can be complete and not only pass downfield. Well, that's what I was so impressed with. Now, the running back screen stuff, I think you need Xavier Scott in there. You need Aaron Jones in there. You could do it a little bit with Mason. I think he could catch the ball to some extent, but you need him to run. He's really a little bit from Scott the last 2 weeks, but it's really like he needs to be running all the time as RB1. So you're asking a lot of him to also be a big part of the passing game. But they actually hit on a tight end screen yesterday. That surprised me. They hit on a slant. That surprised me. They did a lot of things in that game, lining up Jefferson in the backfield, running him out into the flat. There were 2 plays that were 4 and 5 yard plays to Jordan Addison toward the end of the game, which I thought were terrific. I think it's a great play to run a little bubble screen and get 5 yards. 2nd and 5, what's your odds of converting? Pretty high, right? Keep the sticks moving. Keep the ball in the hands of Jefferson and Addison. So I totally agree with you that when McCarthy comes back, yes, there's big plays down the field to be had to Justin Jefferson, but there's also easy buttons that have been there and were there and that, I think they haven't quite utilized enough. KFT says Harrison Phillips is one guy that impacted the run. All the current line struggles. So I think that there's truth to that, but I also do want to point out that he didn't win the camp battle against the other 2 guys that are playing, and that would matter to the evaluation. I also want to pull this up because I don't really think it's been the 2 guys who replaced him who have been the problem in run defense. So Jalen Redmond has a 69.3 grade. He's 4th best on the team other than Harrison Smith and Jonathan Grenard. And Levi Drake Rodriguez is 67.4. So keep those numbers in your mind that so far Redmond and Rodriguez are in the upper 60s, right? For run grade. Last year, Harrison Phillips was, let me find it. Where's Harrison Phillips? Where was he in the run grade? I'm looking. I'm going to have to use Control F. 52.7 last year in the run defense. I think that the reason they were so good in the run defense last year was actually Jonathan Bullard graded much better than Harrison Phillips did. And this is not a disrespect to Harrison Phillips, who I think was a great guy and worked his butt off. And I don't think, by the way, let me add this on, I don't think the PFF grades told the full story with Harrison Phillips. And I actually had a conversation and wrote an article about it, how sometimes he would be jumping gaps and moving bodies where he's getting pushed back, but sort of intentionally to create lanes. And they don't always give him good grades for that, but they're playing the same system here. And he did not grade the same way that he did early in his career. And I think that may have mattered to that decision. But really, when we look at the run defense, the issues, I think it's Hargrave has been a lot of it, and they corrected that. And the other part has been the linebackers and not having Van Ginkel. Dallas Turner has not been as good as Van Ginkel. I wouldn't expect that. And certainly Cashman. I mean, Cashman last year, how good was Cashman in the run defense? I'm going to guess it was really good. Yes, 76.3 grade. That's an elite grade for a linebacker last year. You know who else hasn't played a ton that would make a big difference? Is Harrison Smith. Harrison Smith is one of the best run defending safeties over the last 10 years in the NFL. It's not just the defensive tackle position, even though I overall agree with you that it would have helped to have Harrison Phillips, but I don't think it's the guys who have replaced him who have actually been the issue here. So, really interesting first couple of weeks of the season. So I want to now switch over here. Let me remind you first, though, of the FanDuel question of the day, which is the Vikings are plus 265 to make the playoffs. The NFC teams ahead of them in the odds are Dallas, Atlanta, Seattle, Washington, Green Bay, Detroit, Tampa Bay, and San Francisco. That's 8 teams. So right now, FanDuel at plus 265 have the Vikings ninth in the NFC. Do you agree with that list of teams? Who do you think that they could be better than or have better odds than in the NFC playoff race? So make sure you answer that. And I also want to ask that of my cohorts who will be joining here in a second. So I'm going to switch over to get Brian Murphy and Manny Hill in here. Doing this on the fly takes a second. But so make sure you answer that. I mean, I think the obvious answer is probably the Falcons and the Cowboys are the most suspect of that group. But both of them have shown something over the last couple of weeks. All right. So now I think I successfully have Murph. You got me, Murph?
I got you. You got me?
I do have you. And Manny, we got you?
I hope so.
All right. Wonderful. There we go. That's 2 weeks in a row of me doing this right. It just takes a second. So here we are, the Purple Insider Roundtable with Brian Murphy and Manny Hill, presented by our friends at FanDuel. Well, how about we start there, Manny, with the Vikings get to 3-2 and where their playoff odds are right now, plus 260. FanDuel still does not have them as a playoff team. But how differently do you feel that they got to 3-2 and knowing now that Blake Cashman is coming back, Donovan Jackson is coming back to this team, and while we don't know for sure who the quarterback is, I'm guessing that if they had lost to Cleveland, those playoff odds would be way worse than plus 260 on our friends at FanDuel.
Yeah, I think getting all those key players back is going to be a huge boost. I think on the defensive side, and getting someone like Donovan Jackson back in, I think is really going to help matters because again, we talk about when guys come back from injury, how it kind of can have a domino effect on everybody else because it can kind of move everybody else into a position where they need to be. So, you were talking about the run defense and, how big is it going to be to get somebody like Blake Cashman back, to get somebody, whenever Andrew Van Ginkel is able to come back, that's going to be a huge boost because obviously they're both terrific players, but it's also going to be able to move other players, maybe, more role players back into positions and roles that they, are better suited for and where they can really shine and thrive. So, getting Blake Cashman back as sort of that green dot linebacker is really going to help Eric Wilson because it's going to move him into a spot where that might be better suited for him. Now, he's played admirably in place of Blake Cashman. He's had some really nice moments, but I think getting him back into a specific spot is really going to help and give a boost. And I'm also thinking about, and maybe they have the Vikings odds kind of low still because of, the meat of this schedule is still to come here after the bye. But maybe, and I know I'm going to pick the schedule tonight, it might be a little different based on what we've seen with some of these other teams that are coming up on the schedule, where it might not be as daunting a task for the Vikings going forward, especially if they can get a lot of those guys back and healthy.
That's there's a lot of moving parts, Murph. So tell me what you are thinking coming out of the Vikings win against the Browns.
Week 6 buys never sound good because it seems too early when they come out. I think this is really perfectly timed. I think psychologically, mentally, being sort of marooned overseas for 10 or 11 days, watching your season kind of lurch week to week, not really knowing what's on the other end and how we got here. And there's glimpses of, I kind of think I wrote this, even last night off the game, it was yesterday's win kind of told us everything and nothing about the team, which is we see how they can be successful, and it's pretty narrow right now. So it may not really matter who the quarterback is, but we see them flawed, and we see them flawed pretty good. And 5 games is a pretty good sample size to get a sense. I'm not saying this is the team that we're going to notice in December, but it looks like they were constructed to win now. And they have uncertainty at the quarterback position, and they have uncertainty at the quarterback position because they have so much uncertainty on the offensive line. So their quarterbacks haven't been protected well. They've had to change how they get rid of the ball and the schemes. And, Wentz, who was unemployed as of August 23rd, I think he's done admirable. It should be noted he's won 2 of the 3 games that he started, including 2 overseas games. So this everybody needs a week off to take a breath. Of course, it's a bye, so it's going to be another week to suck the oxygen out of the room about what's going to happen at quarterback. But I just feel like for the club itself, they need this week to just unplug right now. Now, you may want a bye, later in November, practically because of the wear and tear of a season. But I just think mentally they have a chance to really reset, because it's just been an unpredictable first 5 weeks that has exposed and kind of left us wanting to know really exactly who they are.
Yeah, but I think that this is a really good point that both of you are making, which is that we just really, like you said, we just don't really know who this team is yet, because we haven't seen the full version of them. And I've got to think that that's around the corner. Now, I'm still concerned about Andrew Van Ginkel and his long term with the neck injury. Not getting an update from O'Connell today, specifically on him, kind of made me wonder where that's going to be. Trust me, we'll talk to O'Connell again. I got a few notes about that. Like we will. But with him being out and it being unclear with the neck injury, that's a concern. But aside from that, O'Neill's coming back. Jackson's coming back. The other guy is Aaron Jones, where we're not quite sure, but Zay Scott, outside of a fumble, has done very well for them filling in. We're going to get mostly who the Minnesota Vikings are coming out of the bye, playing against the Philadelphia Eagles, who are a little bit battered themselves at this moment, whether that's physically or emotionally. And Manny, the only piece is really the quarterback, and making that decision. I think it does have to factor in that they're going to have at least the majority finally of the offensive linemen starting with whoever is at quarterback. But I think that this is a decision that Kevin O'Connell can make based on what he sees. The bye week also gives him time to get McCarthy back on a practice field and decide, do I like what I see from McCarthy coming back here? Does he look like he's learned some things? Does he look like he's locked in to some of the technical details? Or does it look like in practice, he still doesn't quite have it where he needs to be, and you need to stick with Carson Wentz?
Yeah, and then that's, I think, what's working in their favor is that they are going to have, with this bye week, they're going to have some extra time really to kind of take a look at, where JJ McCarthy is at, coming off this ankle injury, and, how close he is to really being ready to step out there, because you do have this bye week, but you do have the defending Super Bowl champions waiting for you on the other side of this bye. Now, with this bye week, you're going to get a chance to get a look at the Eagles. I think they're playing the Giants this coming Thursday at the Meadowlands. Could be an easy win for the Eagles, but you never know, because it's a short week for them, and they're coming off a loss at home to Denver yesterday. So they're going to have some things working in their favor in this whole process before, deciding to go back to JJ McCarthy or not. But, like you said before Murph and I jumped on, I think really whatever decision Kevin O'Connell makes is ultimately going to be the right one, because he is the guy that sees all of this stuff every single day. He's going to have a better idea of where JJ McCarthy is at than any of us, and we can talk about it and we can speculate about it, and that's fun for us to be able to do that, and fans can get excited or disappointed depending on what decision they make. But ultimately, this choice is Kevin O'Connell's, and whatever decision he decides to make, I'm going to take him at his word that this is the right decision to make for JJ McCarthy and the organization long term.
Well, because there's no person who wants JJ McCarthy to succeed more than Kevin O'Connell. And if he
Right.
holds him back, I'm sure that he's going to hate that. Like I guarantee you, Kevin, he likes football. I'm sure that he found a way to take a look what happened with Drake May, who I think we all know he liked Drake May coming out in the draft. I'm sure that he caught, Michael Penix's game a couple weeks ago where he played extremely well. And I think we all know he liked him. I think he wants really, really badly for his guy that he drafted as the QB guru whisperer, that's his thing, that he wants that guy to succeed. So he's going to handle it the way that he feels is best, which is very hard for me to sit here and go, well, I know better. And this is why, guys, this is why they don't put me on national TV, because I don't say stuff like that. But I'm just being honest. Like, I think that he knows more about it than any of us do, and that this is the right way to handle it. But Murph, you've seen your amount of quarterback controversies in your day. Now, I think that O'Connell needs to handle this the right way for what's best for JJ McCarthy. But if only life were that simple. So why don't you give me some OG sports writer advice for Kevin O'Connell as he goes into this situation that is going to be, I'm sure, in one way or another, discussed a lot?
Well, I give him a lot of credit, and Wentz too, for really not taking any bait yesterday. Really making, they're overly, especially with O'Connell. I mean, he knows how to massage words into what sounds like it might be revealing, but really isn't saying anything. But that's like any good coach. And he's never put himself too out front as this thing develops, because you're going to get boxed in, and you don't want to box yourself in until you know the extent of McCarthy's injury, the extent of his rehab, what he's going to be able to do. And if you really do put an emphasis on his footwork, we know there's a lot of leverage he's got to put on that ankle, and it's a high ankle sprain. And he needed to see 2 to 3 games of Carson Wentz to really understand what he has. And I think what's interesting about the bye, besides just taking a break from all the kind of unexpected twists and turns, 5 games in 5 weeks is already kind of unleashed on the Vikings. It allows O'Connell too to really crack open the playbook and say, okay, this is what I have with the line that I have now. This is what's been successful with the running game. This has been what's successful in getting the ball out quickly, which I know you wrote about today, Coller. I mean, there's ways for him to, kind of like he did in the laboratory a couple years ago when he was forced to play all those quarterbacks, didn't know what he had on a week-to-week basis. I want to say there was a bye week in there where he was able to help either Dobbs or Hall really kind of get acclimated a bit. Maybe I'm wrong. I just seem to think that might have been the case. But at any rate, he's going to have an opportunity as linemen get healthier, as the defense gets healthier, to say, okay, here's what I have to work with. Here's the leverage I might have right now. Here's an opportunity maybe to take a shot here, take a shot there. I really like how he's been able to get and keep Jefferson involved despite the lack of a real downfield attack. He's found moments to hit him and keep him engaged and keep drives alive and just put the ball where, Jefferson can make a play. And I've also, look, we kind of make fun of him a bit for the bag of tricks in the red zone. I give him credit. The direct snap to Akers and the rollout to Oliver was from 32 yards. So, he's getting tricky. He's still tricky, and it worked well. And it's going to take some more of those smoke and mirrors plays. And as you pointed out many times, he's fantastic at finding the right opportunity to take a deep shot against a vulnerable looking defense, or if he feels like he's got the right protection and he can get an extra click in the pocket. He seems to know when to dial up those plays to make a key third down, keep a drive going, interrupt some of the opponent's momentum, and just keep them from imploding. So if he has the full spectrum here of a couple of weeks to really understand where the health of not only his quarterback, but his line, his defense, his running backs, and then honestly figure out this is the kind of plays we could be successful with against Philadelphia, against the Chargers, against Detroit, based on the success we've already seen under Wentz/McCarthy.
I think that O'Connell, sometimes we say like, hey, he needs to look in the mirror a little bit and, focus on, hey, where could he make some changes to help his quarterback? Because well, the whispering has been overall very successful based on what we saw from Kirk and last season with Sam Darnold. And we've never seen Sam Darnold play that confidently. And I think he clearly grew from O'Connell and the coaching and the situation here last year. There were times where we were going, you understand that a swing pass is okay. You understand. And it took 4 backup linemen in the game for him to finally go, you know what? I could just run Jordan Addison in motion and swing it out to him in the flat and let him get a couple of yards and then keep those sticks moving. I was so impressed by the game plan yesterday. And even if they had lost, I would have said it was the right way to go considering their opponents. So I totally agree, Murph, that looking yourself in the mirror in a good way, seeing what you did well and not just going back to that. It does remind me in 2016 of how Pat Shurmur had to come in and start running some West Coast stuff and sort of timing passes in order to negate some of the pass rushes. Not every team has Myles Garrett, but you might want to treat it that way anyway. With JJ McCarthy, it also comes down to McCarthy being able to do it, though, because when you see some of those throws from Wentz, they're just super veteran throws. Drop back, 1, 2, 3, ball out, and then there's Jefferson coming out of his break and it hits him for 12, 14 yards. And you go, that's pro quarterback play right there. And you don't got to do a lot of that in college. So that footwork and that timing and stuff like that, that has to be locked in, or all the stuff we're talking about. Hey, just do the short stuff. Well, it doesn't work if you can't time it out and you can't read it out. And so he has to prove, I think, to O'Connell behind the scenes that he's going to do that. I want to slam on the brakes just for a second, though, with the quarterback discussion, because it can just keep going and going and going because it's so interesting. Can we talk about number 18 for a minute here? Because it gets almost a little bit redundant. Like, great. He's great. Oh, he was great again? Oh, look, he was great again. Yesterday was just another notch in the belt, another mossing on the wall for Justin Jefferson. But when we consider what he said, some of the stuff he said post game and the way that he's handled himself, he said about Jordan Addison, I need to be better with Jordan Addison, which I don't agree with. That's a Jordan Addison problem, bro. He's a grown up. That's not a Justin Jefferson problem. But I've always thought that the culture of a team, as much as it comes from the head guy, is in the NFL only as good as your best player. And one of the main reasons that this thing goes the way it does is because of Justin Jefferson. And I didn't see any frustration from him yesterday, throwing up the arms. We never see water bottles thrown on the sideline. And in the biggest moment, this guy goes up and beats a 4-time Pro Bowler or something to get a huge gain and get that drive into position to score. Manny, we're starting to get to the point with Jefferson where, gosh, it's almost like what the Chris Carter and Randy Moss days, where it's a different quarterback all the time, and they just put up huge numbers because the receivers are truly that good. And he's put himself, and I know he had already done this, but he just continues to put himself in that conversation with Moss and Carter as the greatest receivers in Vikings history and as the best of the generation. I think with some other guys, you're like, yeah, CeeDee Lamb's amazing and has had a great quarterback to help him out and do it. Justin's never really had that. He's had good quarterbacks, but he's never had great. And there he is, elevating another guy who has been a backup for how many years now. You just can't say enough about it.
He's just a machine, man. I mean, he's obviously a human being, although sometimes he does things that make you question if he is a human being, some of the amazing things that he does. But it's everything that he does when he makes these great plays, and he's so, technically sound in the routes that he runs and the way he catches the football. You can't help but to still continue to be amazed by it, even though it has become, to this point in his 6th year in the league, that it's become so routine to where you expect it. So you anticipate that it's going to happen, but when it does happen, you're still mind blown by it. And yesterday was just it was a clinic. It's just what he did against that secondary, which is a very good secondary. The Browns have corners that can cover. They've obviously got a defensive front that can get after the quarterback and make things difficult in the passing game. And he still just comes through. And it's just, he's in that rare conversation, man, of just like one of the GOATs, I mean, obviously Jerry Rice is here, and then everybody else is maybe just a notch below in terms of overall greatness. But Justin Jefferson is putting himself into that conversation of just the greatest, most elite wide receivers that this league has really ever seen. And this is a league that has seen a lot of really, really good wide receivers come through over the years. And he's separating himself from the rest of the field. It's really amazing to watch.
Murph, 449 yards so far for Justin Jefferson in 5 games, pretty much on par with his career average. The next top receiver has 155, and that's Jordan Addison in 2 games. Next receiver after that's 153, which is almost, 300 yards less than Justin Jefferson. I mean, he's gotten to the point where he's carrying this thing now.
Yeah, and those yards too have been hard earned this year. I mean, we haven't seen any 50, 60, 70 yard, blow the roof off kind of plays. It's been, 10, 12, 15-yard chunks, working the sidelines, working the middle of the field, working tight coverage. I was really impressed with Jefferson yesterday on a lot of levels. I thought the way, you talk about clutch baseball players, you talk about clutch hockey players with timely goals, timely hits. Jefferson makes the timely catch. When the offense isn't going anywhere or it's 3rd and 8, he's the one getting the 9th yard. He's the one giving you a sense that, you know what, there may be some hope for Wentz on this drive, in this quarter, this game against this defense. There may be something McCarthy can find, because Jefferson just finds a way to make himself relevant. He kind of refuses to be marginalized. And you're right. Again, this has been written about recently too. It's almost as if, folks in the media or just in general, we're so conditioned to the tantrums and the iPad throwing, as you mentioned, water bottles, getting in the ear of a coach. I mean, it's kind of part and parcel of being a top receiver in the NFL. They want their catches and they want them now. I haven't seen or felt that. It feels like every time the camera will pan on him, you can see him steaming, but it's almost like he's scheming. How can I make myself relevant? How can I help my quarterback? How can I help my team? 123 yards, really some tough catches, no scores, but it didn't matter. He was the best player on the field for the team. And then post game, when it comes out, we come to find out that Jordan Addison inexcusably overseas. Somehow they've been together for 10 days and he misses a walkthrough. I love the fact that Jefferson came up and said, "Hey, I got to talk to you." I let him have it. This isn't being a professional. I'm paraphrasing here, but this is, he's better than that. And I got to do a better job of taking him under my wing. But, I would love to have been a fly on the wall for that conversation, because I'm guessing it wasn't pleasant. And I'm guessing it was, parent teenager. And the thing is, I don't know how many more Addison parent teenager moments he can get in this club. But that just really impressed me with Jefferson from start to finish. And as he has all season and he has all throughout his career, he's emerging as a captain and a leader. He's not just a guy to make the great play. He's the guy that's holding people accountable, including himself. And he's the kind of guy that can really turn the tide of any game. And that's not easy to do if you're only touching the football 5 to 6 times.
I thought we just really saw the Jefferson that when he got the contract extension, these guys could sometimes go 2 ways, right? They can say, this really shows that I'm the franchise guy and I need to act like it and I need to be that dude. I asked Jefferson about this in maybe his training camp, and he said basically that he wasn't always very comfortable with this. He's a little bit on the quieter side as a person, and he's had to force himself to be that guy for this team. And he's taken so much onus on himself that this is his franchise now that he's got that extension, and he has acted like it every bit of the way so far, but they do not even come close to winning that football game without the way he played yesterday. And he deserves credit for that. And we just get caught up sometimes on how are they going to fix this? How are they going to fix that? This is going wrong. That's going wrong. Like, let's just, hit pause and talk about that guy. I want to go over to the defensive side, Manny, because there was a stat today that I had. Actually, I can pull this up for you to get it. So I've got the specific stat. I think we all agree that on the defensive side, the run defense has not been good enough for them. And Quinjon Judkins ran over them. Kenneth Gainwell ran over them. Bijan Robinson ran over them. But let me read you this. I tweeted early today after Chad Graff, friend of mine who covers the Patriots, put out a chart of the expected points added for every team, offense and defense. And I said the Vikings defense has not felt as dominant because of opposing teams' run games, but they are fourth in points allowed per drive and second in yards allowed per drive. I think that Vikings defensive struggles are kind of a mirage based on the fact that, and I'm not saying they did stop Quinshon Judkins and your eyes fooled you. I understand that. But they have not allowed a 200-yard passer yet this season. I think that it's based on the fact that the other team has had the ball a ton against the Vikings. They're averaging 4.5 yards per run allowed, which is 19th, but it's not 32nd. And it's not like they're giving up 6 yards. It's not like, who was it yesterday? Rico Dowdle running over the Miami Dolphins. And I also think that yesterday was pretty instructive toward the second half of the game where they used Rodriguez and they used Redmond more than they used Javon Hargrave. I think that's another thing they have to do going forward. But what are we supposed to make of a defense that has felt like it's got some holes to it, and it does, but also has the numbers of a team that has been as good as they've been defensively over the last few years?
I think it's two things. I think one, because the standard has been set. I think because they were so good against the run last year that we were kind of expecting that. I mean, it was, I want to be careful not to have a hot take here, but it was almost Williams-Wall-esque last year with how good they were against the run, where they just didn't get run on very much at all. And I think naturally we were so used to that, and we were expecting that it was going to be very similar this year, despite them signing 2 defensive tackles who weren't particularly very good against the run last year. So I think we were so used to seeing that when Bijan Robinson breaks off a couple of runs, big runs early in the game against Atlanta, you're like, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on? That's not supposed to happen. This team's supposed to be very good against the run, which leads me to the second part of this, where I think a lot of this is we've seen a lot of just sort of big chunk yardage runs by some of these running backs where, Gainwell was a little bit different with Pittsburgh. But Bijan Robinson comes out and breaks off just a massive run at the start of the game. And he had a couple of really big, huge runs. And Judkins kind of did the same thing yesterday, where he broke off a huge run to get the Browns down inside the 10-yard line. And so I think that's part of it too. It doesn't really feel like, it's not like they have a Saquon Barkley type of, now they're going to see Saquon in a couple of weeks, but it's not like it's Saquon Barkley 30 carries and running for 240 yards like we saw him do, last year so often. And I think that's why, maybe the numbers aren't as, alarming, I guess, as it kind of feels like it should be.
Right.
And I think that's, in a lot of ways, that could be a good sign that maybe the run defense, while it's not what we were hoping it was going to be, it's maybe not quite as bad as we are, sort of seeing it be. And that could be a sign that, and again, they get some of these guys back and healthy. I think that's really going to help matters too.
I just was going to piggyback on that. I agree totally with what Manny said in terms of the standard. We are so used to kind of this being that ferocious, get after it, not giving up big plays, actually making big plays kind of a defense. Thinking back to maybe the 2017 team a little bit, where they dictated terms. Brian Flores dictated terms. A couple things that come to mind. If you remember, I took a quick glance at where they were a year ago at this time at 5-0, right? Just coming back from Europe, having taken care of the Jets and basically getting Robert Saleh fired and making Rodgers look bad. And they go into their bye just, whistling Dixie because they're just thinking everything's great. Well, there was a stat we pounded to death early in the season, and it was, I think it was either 3.5 or 4.5 minutes was all that they trailed through those first 5 games. They were always playing from ahead. They were dominating the first quarter. They were just jumping on teams, and a lot of those teams had to throw to get back into the games. And because they did that, they were able to make the big plays in the secondary or get the big strip sack or the big third down sack. So teams weren't running. Now, you could tell me, Coller, if the volume is there, I've heard you say the averages. Yeah, they are giving up big chunk plays this season compared to last year, but I don't think teams have really run the ball that much last year as they are now because the Vikings have been trailing. The Vikings have been in closer games, and they've also played teams. Caleb Williams, they wanted to get a running game going to protect him. Bijan Robinson is a great running back, and hey, let's get Penix some relief in a tough road environment. Then you're up against Jake Browning, and they were digging a hole from the get go, and we're never running the ball. And then you're, so it just feels like since Pittsburgh finds a way to run on them, it just felt like the Vikings haven't been in the circumstances to play stout run defense because they haven't had the cards to really play, and their offense hasn't done them a ton of favors. So you're right. It does seem like, boy, they should be doing better. Why are they continually getting gashed in the run? But when you threw out the fact that no passer is thrown for over 200 yards, I mean, that's impressive. And the fact that the Vikings are struggling to score probably puts more of a spotlight and magnifies the defense because they're on the field more, and you feel desperate every time they don't get a 3 and out. That when is this going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back?
Right. No, I think circumstances has a huge impact on the run defense and just defense in general, because when we look at the counting stats, the points against, the yards against, I mean, even Cleveland, they gave up 34 to the Detroit Lions, but they didn't even play a bad game defensively. Their offense just gave the ball away a bunch of times and didn't move the ball at all. And so when you rank 28th in number of plays per drive on offense, well, guess who's getting strained? And when a team like Pittsburgh with Arthur Smith, also think about some of the coaches, Kevin Stefanski, Arthur Smith, these guys are rooted in running the ball. This is their specialty. And Arthur Smith did it in Tennessee with Derrick Henry and with 6 offensive linemen or big tight ends and stuff, big personnel. They would do that all the time. And so these are coaches who are good at it and are good at committing to it. At the same time, the Vikings are still top 10 in points against, despite the fact the defense has been on the field as much as they have, which to me says if you could get the offense going, get some longer drives going, when you get everybody back in the other side of the bye and Jordan Addison, assuming that he shows up to everything next week, then you're talking about now an offense that could be a much better version than it was in these first couple of weeks. Not only can be, but absolutely has to be, or eventually your defense will get worn down and it will break apart. But you mentioned Saquon Barkley, and I want to talk about this, is the shape of the NFC at this moment is, we think we've got it all solved, and then it all changes. The first half of that game, on the number of tweets I saw, Bo Nix is toast. He can't win. The Denver's out of it. It's a game over. Philly is going to win the Super Bowl, all that stuff. And then everything changes. Nix leads them back. Philadelphia falls apart. They're now 4-1. Saquon is not the same Saquon. Omarion Hampton's on IR, and the Chargers lose another game pretty handily to Washington. So I want to run through this right now, just using some of the FanDuel, the odds here of the different divisions and take a look at the NFC. Now, I mentioned the FanDuel question of the day was that there are 8 teams ahead of the Vikings plus 265 to make the playoffs. Some of these teams are a little bit suspect. So let me just tell you who the division favorites are in each division, and then we could talk about it a little bit. So the Eagles are still the favorite in the NFC East. The Lions have shot ahead of the Packers in the NFC North at plus 105. Tampa Bay, after yesterday, is now minus 350 to win the South. And the 49ers are the favorite right now at minus 115 to win the NFC. I think that this schedule, though, Manny, now facing the NFC East is much more intriguing after what we've seen, because all of a sudden Philly looks a little bit more vulnerable. Washington, though, is fine with Jaden Daniels. Dallas looks more dangerous. And after a brief, whoa, hey, look at the Giants week, they went back to being the Giants and lost to the worst team in football. So let's talk about the NFC East, because it's all still to come for the Minnesota Vikings on their schedule. So what do you think about what happened with Philly and what we saw from some of the other teams over the last couple of weeks about how hard this is going to be to face the NFC East?
Yeah, and I'm kind of looking at the schedule as a whole, even beyond the East. I mean, obviously, if you got Philadelphia and you've got Washington and Dallas and the Giants all ahead, it's going to be kind of a trio of NFC East games in December coming up. And you're going to get Philadelphia here in a couple of weeks. But really, and this is almost the beauty of the NFL, is that you think you have these teams in the first couple of weeks. You think you've got it all figured out. You think you understand who the best teams are and who's playing the best football and who's this team's going to be really tough to beat. And then injuries happen or players just are not as good as they were last year. And, I think Saquon Barkley is a perfect example of that. He's only averaging 3.2 yards a carry right now, not even like half as good as what he was last year. He was amazing last year. And again, this kind of goes to show you about how things can turn quickly for even some of the greatest running backs of a generation. So now this matchup with Philadelphia, when you're going to have a bye week and time to prepare for them, now they're going to be coming off of a kind of a mini bye because they've got the Giants this Thursday, but you're going to have some time to really get a look at the Eagles. You're going to get a chance to look at what the Broncos were able to do in the second half to kind of slow them down and make things challenging for Jalen Hurts and not allow Saquon Barkley to really be a factor. So this is an opportunity now for the Vikings in a game that we thought was likely going to be a sure loss, especially when we were seeing the Vikings not play as well as we were hoping. Now this is an opportunity to, maybe take advantage of a team that's reeling a little bit in the Philadelphia Eagles. And, when you get to Washington later, I mean, Washington seems like they've gotten back to who they are with Daniels getting back and healthy and everything after missing a couple games. But again, that game is on December 7th. That game is 2 months away. There's a lot that can happen between now and then with them. And Dallas seems to be playing a little bit better. Still have a lot of question marks about that defense still. And then the Giants, I don't know if the Giants are really going to be playing much better come week 16 because they're just not very good. But yeah, I mean, I think it kind of goes to show that a lot of things can happen over the course of the season that, can really change the fortune of how things turn out for you. When it may have looked like a daunting task, it might not be as such by the time you get to those matchups.
Who's coaching the New York Giants at that point might be a
Yeah.
question that we're asking. Dallas, though, not just going away into the night despite all their drama. Dak Prescott playing MVP caliber football. Now, Murph, I want to redirect to the NFC North because let me just read you something about the Detroit Lions. Now, they've been great, absolutely great, and I believe that they will continue to be really good. But I'm going to throw something out there for you. So they lose to the Green Bay Packers to start the season, and their victories have been decided after, but they've been decided against the Bears, Ravens, who stink apparently, Browns, and the Jake Browning Bengals. I can't say that is the most impressive schedule. You talk about trying to predict the schedule before the season, strength of schedule. You would have said, oh man, Bengals and Burrow and Ravens and Lamar. The Lions could be out of it by the first month. And now we're talking about that is about the easiest schedule that anyone's faced so far this season. So as a Detroit native, Murph, how good are the Detroit Lions?
They're as good as their record says they are. They're 4-1 and in first place in the NFC North. You're right. I think there is a little shine off of that when you consider the competition, but it's not their fault. They don't get to pick the schedule, and the Vikings are essentially playing the same one. So everyone in the NFC North is playing the same schedule. So they're all going to have a chance to kick Jake Browning and the Bengals around. And what's interesting, we talked, you were saying, we think we have it all figured out. And Manny was saying, yeah, you just don't know because things happen. And that's the beauty of the NFL. And that's what's so fascinating is that it's all great to look at everything on paper and base things off of what happened last year, project what may happen, look at a schedule that comes out in May and think you have a sense of, well, that's going to be a rough go. And this is going to be a tough stretch. Then you start, Coller, what do? That's why we play the game.
That's why we play the games.
You play the games, then the injuries mount, bad decisions happen, controversy. I look at what happened to the Arizona Cardinals last night. That could be a franchise-altering loss, the way it went down, and that could sink their season for a long time. Look at what happened to the Bears after their Hail Mary loss in Chicago and not being able to manage the clock in Detroit. I mean, there are things that occur throughout a season that you don't know the cumulative effect that's going to have on the locker room. You don't know how the butterfly effect comes. Who'd have thunk the Baltimore Ravens would be struggling as badly as they are defensively and be 1-4? Anybody that saw the Ravens on the schedule thought Lamar Jackson, that's going to be an extremely difficult matchup. So, and even now at 5 games, I mean, yeah, we have a pretty good idea of what we think the Vikings can do, but we don't know 3 weeks from now what may happen. We don't know what may happen off the field. There's always so many things that occur that you're not in control of, something an opponent will do to you, something that gets said, something that gets there's just so many variables when it comes to managing a sideline and managing a locker room and managing yourself throughout this 17-game grind. And it's why we all tune in. That's the beauty of it. So you're right. I feel like there's, as far as the Lions to bring it all in for a landing, I mean, I think they're the most equipped to kind of deal with the ebbs and flows because they've been really ascending for several years now. I think they realize this is their time. They're pretty talented, and they don't waste time putting a lot of points on bad teams. They may not be 40-point blowouts, but they know how to handle bad teams. And I feel like they are going to get challenged, but I feel like they're in a pretty good position to play big games against tough opponents. They've been doing it for a while, but I don't think they have a stranglehold per se on the division. I think Green Bay's still going to be relevant. And I think the Vikings did afford themselves and bought themselves a little more hope yesterday that they can still be relevant going through, the meat grinder of the schedule.
I don't think that they're as good as a bunch of blowouts, that they're just going to score 40 points a game. I think that they will face tougher opponents that maybe reveal some of the things that we were concerned about. At the same time, while they're having some injuries on the defensive side, Terry and Arnold is out. DJ Reed is out as well. I think both those guys are on IR, so that could be somewhat problematic for them. But what they have, and they showed this last year when they dealt with injuries, and they've shown it in the past a number of times, is, and I'm glad you brought up Jonathan Gannon because it really shows the juxtaposition of those two guys. Dan Campbell knows how to guide a team through just about anything. And I tend to think this about Kevin O'Connell as well, but man, Dan Campbell has shown he could do this. I promise you, if a guy made a terrible mistake, that Dan Campbell is not going to go punch him like Jonathan Gannon did. And, he apologized today. You can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. Once you have crossed that line, you cannot uncross it. And that is over in Arizona with Jonathan Gannon. But also, you're only as good as your best player, and Kyler Murray just ain't it. Murray is a fun and flawed player who just is not good enough to get a team over 500. That's the quarterback that he is, and that's the coach that Jonathan Gannon's going to be. But you see from Dan Campbell, he can push them through just about anything, and I think that gives them an edge. I also think he's better at it than Matt LaFleur. I mean, Matt LaFleur is a great schematic coach, but I don't know if he's always the best game management coach. He botched it the other night. He's done that a number of times. Their special teams is always bad, and you wonder if that kind of goes back to how much you care about it, which is what I tend to think about special teams. They're up and down throughout the different seasons with Jordan Love. So I think Detroit is the most fit for it, and they also have a lot of the same players they've had for years who have bonded around this idea that they can compete for a Super Bowl. So I think they will be extremely, extremely tough. So usually it's Thursday that we pick the schedule and have Manny go through every single game and decide whether the Vikings will win or lose. But Manny, you are busy this Thursday. Plus, it's also the bye week. Like, I shouldn't make you work on the bye week. If it was Murph, I would grind him right into the dust. But we got to give you a break from time to time. So
I'm unavailable Thursday, by the way.
Well, that's a shame, and unavailable for golf. I found out this week, which is very disappointing. But let's go after you didn't play well the other day. Kind of interesting.
Really? Is this where we're going?
Interesting that
we can break down our golf games anytime.
Just saying that you're suddenly unavailable.
I didn't fall off a tee box after my tee shot, but that's safe.
So let me just tell the story there.
Please do.
Because I want it to be made clear how far that drive went. So we were playing what course is that? Les Bolstad, which is on the University of Minnesota. And there's a par 5 that's a very difficult hole, and it's a little bit of a dog leg right. And so I was on the tee box, par 5. It's, I don't know, 460 or something like that. So I hit the drive and
Of his life. I'll give you that.
I freaking crushed this thing. I mean, we're talking probably like 275, 280. It's downhill. It might have rolled even farther than that. So I destroy this thing. But it's going around the dog leg right. It's got a little bit of a nice little cute fade to it. So I'm kind of walking back, trying to see where it's going to land. And then I see some people down there that we didn't see. So then I'm looking there as I'm walking back, and I fell right over a bench that was there. Now, who puts a bench right next to the tee box? That doesn't make any sense. So
That's where you rest while your other players tee off. It's totally relevant.
Do you want to just be there distracting other players? You want to be away from the tee box. So then I fell. I hit my arm, and it scraped the entire side of my arm off. So the rest of the round, I'm playing just with blood dripping down my arm. But I parred the hole, and it was a great drive, and I would do it again.
All right, I'll give you that, but it'd just be like Aaron Judge tripping over first base after, beating Barry Bonds' record.
Anyway, we're going to pick the schedule here.
We're picking the schedule, though.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about the.
Sorry, I can't golf, but we got a good story out of it.
The 2 holes where Murph just gave up the other day. So let's go to the schedule then. Because of time limitations and the fact that I want to watch football, let's just get one very definitive and strong sentence about each game from both of you after you make your picks. And please keep track of your own records because you guys know that I will mess this up. So let's start with, out of the bye week, the Vikings face off with the Philadelphia Eagles. Please clarify who's playing quarterback and then make your pick, Manny.
I'm going to say JJ McCarthy is playing quarterback, and I'm going to pick the Vikings to win the game.
Oh, okay.
Wow. I am so not Manny right here. I'm going to say Carson Wentz is going to start because they did say 4 to 6 weeks. It's a high ankle sprain. And so I'm going to say Wentz starts. And I think the Eagles are going to take care of business until I'm shown otherwise that the Vikings can take down a high-quality opponent.
All right. A couple days later, they will play a battered Los Angeles Chargers team. Do they go out to LA? I think it's going to be less of a takeover, but man, there were a lot of, who knew there were that many Commanders fans, just period, in that stadium. So do the Vikings, though, beat the beaten up Chargers?
Chargers are banged up. I don't think it's a hard place to play, but it is going to be a short week and the Vikings will have to travel. So I think the Vikings will play well, but the Chargers will make one extra play and win the game.
Okay. So you've got them now at 4-3. Murph?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm going to take them. I had them at 3-3 after the loss.
Yep.
I'm going to take them to 4-3, winning in LA. And I'm also going to have Wentz starting one more game. As Manny said, it's not a great home atmosphere for the Chargers, maybe more so for the Rams, but definitely not the Chargers. It is a tough West Coast Thursday night turnaround, and this is the 4th sentence I'm offering you. But I do think this is the opportunity that they will have with Wentz and a banged up Chargers team to go to 4-3.
Semicolons. You had semicolons in there.
All right, I'm not going to say. Okay, go ahead.
Let's go to. Can't help ourselves. Let's go to week 9, where the Vikings go on the road to play against the Detroit Lions at their House of Horrors in the Kevin O'Connell era, Ford Field.
Yeah, I've been pretty consistent with this one. It's a hard place to play, total opposite of at the Chargers. So I'm going to give the Vikings a loss here. The Lions are just a better football team.
All right, you've got them 4-4. Go ahead, Murph.
Yeah, the Vikings are going to lose. The Lions are better. It's a tough environment. McCarthy does come back. I think it's a nice little setup since he had played in Michigan. I don't think he's the reason they lose. I just think Detroit's better.
Okay, home against the Ravens to set up back-to-back home games there in November.
Is Lamar back by then?
I'm going to say yes. I think he will be.
All right. If Lamar's
November
back,
9th.
Yeah, if Lamar's back by then, I'll give the Ravens the win.
Murph?
Yeah, I'm going to boy, I don't know. I think this is more of a coin flip than I thought it was going to be. I had Baltimore winning this game every time we picked. If Lamar's back, yes, but those hamstring injuries, boy, I'll give the Vikings the win.
Okay, so Murph has them at 5-4, Manny at 4-5. All right. Okay. Let's go to the next game, which will be at home against the Chicago Bears. I'm very interested to see what the Bears look like at this point because they've gotten a couple of wins against some teams that are not so impressive, though. Does Caleb Williams continue to play at a high level? I mean, you look at his stats right now, he's played pretty good football, but that might be different by the middle of November. So did the Vikings beat Chicago at US Bank Stadium?
My opinion on this might change as we get closer to this game, but for now, I'm going to stick with the Vikings winning because they're at home and they're going to be a pretty tough quality opponent for the Bears to go up against. So I'll take the Vikings winning here.
I'll take the Vikings winning at home again as well. I just know it's not going to be the same Bears team we saw in the season opener or even that we're looking at now. And, McCarthy should be on a roll by then.
So we got 5-5 and 6-4. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go to Lambeau, November 23rd. This is circled on my calendar. I cannot wait for this football game. And I guess the world will be hoping that it's JJ McCarthy's debut at Lambeau, which would be really something to drive through the darkness and dodge all the deer in order to get to. But is it going to be worth my dangerous drive, Manny?
I think it'll be worth the drive because I think it'll be a really well-played game by both teams, but I think the Packers will come out on top.
All right.
Well, it's always worth your drive. This is going to be a great game. I think McCarthy's going to play well and afford himself really well at Lambeau, but I do think Green Bay is going to prevail.
All right. Let's go out to Seattle, where, at least thus far, Sam Darnold has been playing phenomenal National Football League football for that team, but their defense looked incredibly suspect against a banged-up Tampa Bay Bucks team. You talk about week to week, I would have thought that Seattle would have had a pretty good defense. And now all of a sudden, wow, that was really an incredible football game to watch. The jerseys were brilliant. It was magical. I loved it. But it definitely made you think twice about Seattle's defense. Can the Vikings go out to that difficult place to play and come home with a win?
Well, and I'm not so sure it is a difficult place to play anymore because
fair enough.
Historically, the last year and into this year have been a much better road team than they have been at home. And with that defense, not being very good, I think this is a chance for the Vikings to go out there, if it's JJ McCarthy or Carson Wentz, to go out there and play well. So I'm going to give the Vikings a win here.
I agree. I don't think Seattle's as difficult as it used to be. Still loud, but I think this may be a shootout. I mean, I think the way Seattle's looked, I think this might be an opportunity for maybe McCarthy to stretch it and O'Connell to stretch their wings a little bit. But I do think Darnold's going to put up some numbers too. So, but I do think the Vikings will prevail. Call it overtime or a Reichard walk-off.
Okay, as long as it doesn't hit TV wire, then it'll be fine. I don't know. O'Connell was just like, I don't know. What do you want me to tell you? They didn't give us.
It was really wide right, though. It's interesting to think that it could have been.
I mean, when it was kicked, I thought it was good. And then it just kind of went like, nope. And I thought wind or I don't know, like, is it different in Europe the way the ball flies? Like, I'm not sure, but it certainly looked like it from its flight because it all of a sudden took like a hard right turn, but I don't know. So where are you guys at? Where are we at records wise here? Is it
I've got them at 6-6. Yep.
Yeah, and that would be at 7-5.
7-5. Okay. All right, down the final stretch here, Washington Commanders at US Bank Stadium. Jaden Daniels' first trip to US Bank Stadium. We think, as long as he's healthy, it might be Marcus Mariota. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's really going to depend on who the quarterback is for Washington. If Daniels is healthy at this point, I'm going to give Washington the win. I kind of anticipate that, so I'm going to give the Commanders the win. But if it's Marcus Mariota, I would like the Vikings' chances. But for now, I'm going to assume that Jaden is healthy and that it'll be him and that Washington will get the win.
Yeah, they're a much better and different team with Jaden. I think if he's there, they do win. So I get him to 7-6.
All right. Manny's got him 6-7. Murph's got him 7-6. Cowboys. You're going to that one, Murph, on the Purple Insider dime. So run up your tab in Jerry World. But Manny, do
One
they
drink, one dog should be it.
Yeah, that's all the stipend can afford. Manny, do they win this game though?
Yeah, I think they do because I think it's going to be similar to what I anticipate the Seattle game to be, where it's going to be a lot of points. The Cowboys defense can't really stop anybody, but they have enough talent on offense to put enough points on their own as well. I don't think Jerry World is a very tough place for opposing teams to play at. So I'll give the Vikings the win on what right now is slated to be a primetime game.
7-7 then.
Yeah, I have them winning too, but it's in probably a really high scoring, weird way. You got to be nervous about facing a team like Dallas. You just don't know what they are. They're somewhat dangerous, somewhat vulnerable, and you don't know at any given minute which one it's going to be. But I think they'll prevail.
So now that's where are you at, Murph?
8-5.
8-5. Wow. Purple Murph at 8-5.
Got a long way to go. A lot of football left after week 14.
Are you guys both giving a W at the Giants, or is there any dissension there? Can we just move on from that?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
I'm
All
fine
right.
with
Well,
it.
I don't need your sentences. I just want to get to the games I care about, which is Detroit and Green Bay at home. So let's start with home against the Lions. The atmosphere on Christmas Day should be wonderful, and some of the nation will see it on Netflix.
Well, I've been saying I feel like the Vikings are going to split these two games one way or the other. I'm going to go with a loss at home against Detroit
To go to
for Christmas
500.
Day.
8-8. Yeah. All right, Murph.
Yep.
Yeah, I've got them. I think I've had this split since we've been picking. I still feel the same way. Lose to Detroit at home, win the finale in Green Bay.
So
that gets them, for me, to 9-6, I believe.
would it be 9-7 if they lose to Detroit, right? 9-7?
9-7, yeah.
Yep. And then so you both have them beating Green Bay on the final day of the season. So Murph has them at 10-7. Manny has them at 9-8. And I think all things considered, with the way that this has gone, the quarterback situation, the injuries and everything else, in both of those scenarios versus the tough schedule, which I think when you go through it, even though it's not as tough as we talked about, still a lot of difficult games at Lambeau, at Seattle, at Detroit, finishing with the two best teams in your division. Not easy times to come for the Minnesota Vikings. If they end up with 10 or 9 wins, I think you can say they'll have a chance to make the playoffs. And with all the things that have happened so far this year, that would be a victory to be. It wouldn't be what we thought it was going to be at the beginning of the season, where we're starting with that bar at 11. But I probably have it at 9 or 8 myself.
Can I ask a bonus question?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Manny, if you have them at 9-8, do you have them actually making the playoffs?
I'm going to say no, because I think there are, and obviously tiebreakers and all that stuff will come into play, but I think there's going to be a lot of teams in the NFC that are going to be kind of hanging around that same sort of record, same amount of wins, that might end up getting into the playoffs ahead of the Vikings.
And I agree. I don't think 9-8 is all that bad. If it's McCarthy the majority of the way after what they've endured, you may have to just deal with a non-playoff year. That's not going to sit well with a veteran wrestler, but that's the risk you take when you're handing it over to someone like McCarthy.
So let me pull that back to the FanDuel question of the day, which is there's 8 teams ahead of the Vikings on FanDuel for the odds to make the playoffs. The Vikings at plus 265. Who do you think that they could get ahead of? And when we look at it, though, I think we can look, it's a long way to go. There are some teams in here. Actually, there might be 9. I may have counted wrong. There's 9 ahead of them, which makes them 10th. But when we look at the teams ahead of them, San Francisco is a favorite. Los Angeles is probably the one that I forgot to name. Los Angeles is in there as well. Then you have Tampa Bay is having a great start to their season, but that might be a little smoke and mirrors-y, but they're going to probably win that division. Where I think it gets a little bit on the softer side in the back of the NFC would be teams like Dallas and Atlanta and even Seattle. Like, these are the teams you're going to be racing against. As well as Sam Darnold is playing, Seattle's 3-2. They have the same record as the Minnesota Vikings. And Dallas has still no defense. And if Dak gets banged up at all, they could be in trouble. Atlanta's a Jekyll and Hyde team, just like the Vikings. So I think that there's two sort of sections of the NFC. There is the very, very serious section of the NFC, which to me is probably, despite their loss, the Rams. I think we got to give it to San Francisco based on reputation. Philadelphia, we're going to see this week, but still deserves the benefit of the doubt there. Washington has, I think, the best quarterback in the conference. Detroit, Green Bay. You got to beat out somebody that's in the second tier, whether that is the Rams or Seattle or Green Bay. With 7 teams making the playoffs these days, it gives you one extra team to kind of race against. And as we're laying it out right now, you need to get ahead of one of them. And there's games against some of those teams. There's games against the Washington. There's games against Seattle. But I think the way it's laid out right now, it's a very, very tough road to hoe when you're talking about just getting to 9 wins with the teams that are in that clump. Because if we say that the wild card teams as of right now, Los Angeles and Washington and Green Bay, who are you beating out of those? So they need somebody to slip, right? And get into the playoffs that way.
Yeah, and Atlanta is going to be the team that I'm going to really pay a lot of attention to, because if those two teams end up with if the Vikings and Falcons end up with the same record, the Falcons are going to have the tiebreaker because of the head-to-head matchup.
Yep.
So that's going to be something to watch. But in the case of Seattle, if Dallas hangs around in these situations, you're going to have a chance to play those teams. So even if you end up tied with them, if you beat them, you're going to have a tiebreaker over them in that scenario. So those are the teams that the Vikings are going to be playing are also the teams that they're going to be sort of jostling with, except for the Rams. The Rams aren't on the schedule, but some of these other teams that are going to be hanging around, Washington's another one.
Yep.
That you're going to have a chance to sort of separate yourself from those teams by just beating them and getting that tiebreaker advantage.
You don't exactly.
One last quick point. I think too, preseason, I thought it was a very good chance there'd be 3 teams from the NFC North to make it. Now I'm not as sure. And as much as it matters to always get divisional wins to try to win the title, I don't think the Vikings are going to win the NFC North, but they're going to have to win their division games to get in. So I just feel like 10 wins is the magic number for them.
The 2 games against Green Bay could swing this entire thing, because Green Bay has that tie in there, and they are certainly an up and down team. Washington is a little easier to pencil in with Jaden Daniels, but you don't know about, maybe his health or whatever. He does take a lot of hits. So, oof, man, football. It is going to be a fascinating race as we go forward. And I'm enjoying already kind of this bye-week bigger picture conversation about where this team is at. So I'm glad that we could get together this evening, and we'll do something different on Thursday night, Manny. Somebody else I'll have fun with here. Just maybe talk with the fans on Thursday. Maybe they'll pick the schedule. That'll be either 0-17 or 17-0 based on Vikings fans and how they are.
Despite the 3 wins, they're still convinced they're not going to win at all.
Manny Hill, Brian Murphy, every Monday night here on the show. So thank you guys so much for your time. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And if you didn't answer the FanDuel question today, make sure that you do that as well. So appreciate everybody watching, and we will catch you all very soon. Football.